the college football rankings and the rankings for the new college football rankings. So I've still got Oregon at number one because even though they didn't play last week, there's no reason not to still have them at number one because they're the only team left now that is undefeated, and they still probably have the best win of the season. And Oregon has for sure now earned themselves a spot in the Big Ten championship, even if they were to lose to Washington this week, which of course is not going to happen this year. And I've got Ohio State at number two still. A dominant win over Indiana last Saturday. Their defense was very good, and they played great on special teams too. Caleb Downs had a 79-yard punt return touchdown, and offensively, they didn't do a ton, but they played okay, being against Indiana's defense that has been one of the best in the country this season, and Abuka was able to have a big game after not doing a lot the last couple of games. He had seven catches for 80 yards and a touchdown. And the college football playoff rankings still have Oregon at one and Ohio State at two. So I have Georgia at the highest of the SEC teams at three, while the college football playoff rankings have Texas at three. I've got Georgia at three and Texas at four because Georgia does have the win over Texas, even though Texas has the better record. Georgia just played Massachusetts last week and destroyed them 59 to 21. You would have expected them to win by about that amount, but you wouldn't have expected them to give up 21 points to Massachusetts. But I don't really think anything about it because Georgia has shown to be inconsistent in games like this. But Texas did fine last week, getting the win over Kentucky at 31 to 14, and their defense played great. Kentucky only really got one offensive touchdown in the game, and offensively, I thought they did fine too. To score 31 against a Kentucky defense that's pretty good. And the college football playoff rankings have Penn State at number four, and I've got Notre Dame at five, and the college football playoff rankings have them at five also. So Notre Dame, destroyed Army by 35 points last week, which is fully expected. But Notre Dame, like with Penn State, I don't think is a serious national title contender. Notre Dame hasn't even played an elite team this season, and I think as soon as they play one in the playoffs, if they get a spot in the playoffs, they will lose. And Penn State, I've got at number six. They struggled last Saturday, just barely getting the win over Minnesota, 26 to 25. And Minnesota is not a good team at all. Their defense didn't play like you would have expected them to, giving up 25 points to Minnesota, whose offense is not very good. Miami is at six in the playoff rankings. I've got them at seven. So I've got them at the highest in the ACC. SMU, I've got it number eight. But Miami and SMU are almost sure now to play for the ACC championship. And Miami, I've got ranked higher right now because of a talent advantage over SMU. But if those two teams do play in the ACC championship, I do think that SMU would have a good chance of winning. both of the two teams just played terrible opponents last Saturday, but they both did fine. Miami blew out Wake Forest 42-14, and SMU blew out Virginia 33-7. So in the playoff rankings, Georgia is 7 and Tennessee is 8. So I've got Indiana at 9, and the college football playoff rankings have SMU at 9. So I didn't drop Indiana out of the top 10 because they did lose to a really good team, but I did move them down 6 spots because it was a blowout loss, and blowout losses are never good, no matter how good the team you lost to is. So I've got Tennessee at number 10, and Indiana is 10 in the playoff rankings. So Tennessee just played UTEP last week and destroyed them 56-0, like you would expect them to do. And I've got at 11 Ole Miss. The playoff rankings have Boise State at 11. Ole Miss, I think when they're playing at their ceiling like they did in the Georgia game, would have a chance to beat anybody in the country, including Oregon and Ohio State. And I don't know what Lane Kiffin was thinking last Saturday on those Big East runs when he decided to have a 325-pounder run to the side and not up the middle. And Jackson Dart made some mistakes too. Those two interceptions were all his fault, and he didn't block for Big East on one of those fourth down runs that caused Big East to get tackled short of making the line to gain. And Alabama, I've got at number 12. They had an even more embarrassing loss than Ole Miss did uh, last week. With all the talent that Alabama has, only scoring 3 points is unacceptable. Even though Oklahoma does have a really good defense, and Alabama's defense didn't play as well as you would have thought they would have in that game. So Clemson is number 12 in the college football playoff rankings. And I've got Arizona State at 13. They got a big win over BYU, 28-23. And now all Arizona State has to do is beat Arizona this week, and they go to the Big 12 championship for sure. And right now, Arizona State would be my pick to win the conference. So Alabama is 13 in the college football playoff rankings. And Clemson is 14 in my rankings, and Ole Miss is 14 in the college football playoff rankings. So Clemson just played an FCS team and beat them 51-14, like you would expect them to do. I've got Iowa State at 15. The college football playoff rankings have South Carolina at 15. So Iowa State didn't do very well last week. They did win, but they only beat Utah 31-28, and Utah has turned out to be one of the worst teams in the Big 12 this season. But Iowa State still has a chance to go to the conference championship. And I've got BYU at 16. Arizona State is 16 in the playoff rankings. I didn't move BYU down a lot because it was a close road loss to a pretty good team, but they were an overrated team, it seems like. And I've got Boise State at 17. The college football playoff rankings have Tulane at 17. Boise State's running back Ashton Jeanty now has over 2,000 yards at rushing and is in second place for the Heisman Trophy. And I've got South Carolina at 18. 18 in the playoff rankings is Iowa State. So South Carolina, like Clemson, just played an FCS team and destroyed them. They won 56-12. But that South Carolina Clemson game this week, I think, is going to be a very good game. And number 19, I've got Texas A&M. So even though Auburn can be a very tough place to play, Texas A&M still should have won that game because Auburn just is not a very good team this year. And Texas A&M's defense should have been able to do better than they were able to. As much talent as they have on that side of the ball, and as bad as Auburn's offense has been this season, so 19 in the playoff rankings is BYU, and I've got Kansas State at 20, and Texas A&M is 20 in the college football playoff rankings. So Kansas State blew out Cincinnati last week, 41-15, and I know Cincinnati's a terrible team, but Kansas State finally played like you would expect them to after not playing very well these last couple of weeks. And Missouri, I've got ranked at 21, which is what they are in the playoff rankings. So they just beat Mississippi State, who's the worst team in the SEC, but they did win 39 to 20. So Illinois is 22 in my rankings, and UNLV is 22 in the playoff rankings. So Illinois beat Rutgers last week, who is about an average team, 38-31. So I guess they did okay. And I've got Duke at 23, and Illinois is 23 in the playoff rankings. So Duke beat Virginia Tech last week at 31 to 28, but it's pretty impressive what Duke has been able to do this season with a much worse roster, being able to do at least as well as they did last season. And I've got Syracuse at 24. Kansas State is 24 in the college football playoff rankings. So Syracuse does not have a big win this season, and they're not a great team, I know. But I was right about Syracuse, it turns out, because I thought that they would win 8 games this season. And I've got Colorado at 25, and so does the playoff rankings. Now, I don't think Colorado is actually a top 25 team. I think they're just a big joke, but I couldn't really think of who else to put at 25. But that will be it with this video, and please subscribe, and thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.